All right, Jet fans. We are, 9 days out next week, plus a couple of days for the NFL draft. And it may surprise you that perhaps no one has yet informed you about how the NFL teams actually create and build their draft boards. Yes, Frankie from Flatbush, FSPN, we are about to show you how it actually works. And so we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to take a look at an example. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you that we're sponsored by chemtrails. Frankie is sponsored by Frankie. What? Yeah, this is our blog over here. Over on Substack, frankiefromflatbush.substack.com. We call it Chemtrails. It's a New York Jets blog. You can see we got a Sunday newsletter. We got special interest stories that go out usually on Thursdays. Geno Smith and a Carl Dunbar and the Glenn Fence and all of this. So if you enjoy Jet's writings, subscribe to Chemtrails. I would really appreciate it. It's always going to be free. Comes right into your email inbox. And what could be better, but it's free. Sign up, frankiefromflatbush.substack.com. There's also video and audio and all of this stuff. Look at all this stuff that we got over here now. Most of this you already seen. We got some notes. We got some archives. We got Substack is growing and growing into a social network site. So you may want to familiarize yourself with Substack and check out the blog. Now, what do we got here, Frankie? Well, this right here in the blue is an example of a vertical, what they call a vertical board. This is what you're used to. It's a vertical list of prospects that, that are graded. Now, for this example, we're using Matt Miller. We're using his grades because we needed somebody who has published actual grades instead of just rankings. So these are his grades. We're just using them for illustrative purposes only. So this right here, this portion of the deal is, a vertical board, and they're sorted by the score, the grade. So Jeremiah Love gets a 98. Nando gets a 95. Caleb Downs a 95. Arvell 94. Sonny Styles 94. So forth and so on. So you might say, well, Jeremiah Love, if this were your board, your vertical board, we're just using it as an example, then you would say, okay, at pick 2, we're taking Jeremiah Love. He's the highest. Nando's going to go 1. We're taking Love, right? Wrong. Why is that wrong? Well, because you have to weight, which is what's over here. You have to weight your needs, and this is what the teams will do. So over here, I've created 13 positions on the team, and what their positional weight score is, as you can see here, there's basically 13 positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, offensive guard, offensive center, fullback. You might not have fullback on yours, but again, this is just an example. And then over on defense, edge, defensive tackle, you could separate that, for example, into nose tackle and defensive tackle. Linebacker, cornerback, safety. You could include a nickelback in here. You could do it any way you want, but again, this is just an example. So there's 13 positions that we're weighting. And then the things that you need the most weigh the most, right? So I have it, and again, this is subjective. You might have this differently, but this is, again, just an example. So I have edge weighted the most. That's what we need the most. And then wide receiver, number 2, and then safety, number 3, and then defensive tackle, number 4, and then linebacker, number 5, and then a tight end, and then we need a quarterback. And this is all based on who's on the roster for next year so far, as we know. So with that in mind, you then come back to your vertical board, And what you're going to do is when you convert this to a table, you're just then going to sort it and see who comes out on top. Because what this is, and now you see why the discussion is Reese or Bailey, because Reese and Bailey come out 1-2. Now, why is that? Well, you take the score that you graded them as a prospect as, you multiply it by the positional weight that you just gave based on what you need, and that gives you the score. So this tells you that if you're picking second and Reese and Bailey are there, you should take Reese. Right? This is what we're talking about. This is how teams do it. This is what's called a horizontal board, or just basically their board. And so when teams say they're picking the best available player, that's true in a sense because they're weighing in their positional weights of what they need. Now, like I said, you could do a bunch of things with this, but it's the basic idea. You could multiply this by 10 to give you a larger number. You could do a calculation that makes it smaller, or whatever if you want to have a different kind of system. But you can see, because even though Jeremiah Love was the highest graded player, because we didn't have any need for him, he's the lowest of this top 10. Now, you could do different things. So like, this is just an example of what we're talking about here. But you could also have this column I left clear. You could have a positional value column that you put into the mix where you value the quarterback, say, as the highest, as you should. It's the most important position. So you would give that 13, and maybe, you would multiply that out and get a different kind of score, because, and I don't really love that, but it's a theory, because, are the Kansas City Chiefs taking a quarterback? The quarterback position is so important that you would give it a 13 out of 13 positions, right? You want it to weigh the most in the formula. But there's no way in hell that the Chiefs are taking a quarterback anywhere high in the draft, and probably not at all. Maybe they take one late, to get a backup or a third stringer or something. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're really talking about how do you decide between some of these players. And so, you could do that, and you could have different weights and measures. This is just an example to show what a weighted draft board would look like. And you could put different weights and measures if you want to. You could have a different idea about what else you want factored in. For example, you may want to factor in not only what your team looks like today, but what you anticipate it looking like tomorrow. So, for example, the next year, you may know, for example, you're losing Breece Hall, or you may anticipate you're losing Brandon Stevens, or this one or that one. And you're going to say, all right, we're losing these guys in a year, so the positional weight needs to reflect the fact that we anticipate we're going to lose these 5 guys over here from these position groups, and therefore that positional weight needs to change, because we can't just judge based on what the roster is going to look like in 2026. We need to know what it's going to look like in 2 and 3 years, because when you're on a rookie contract, that's a 4 or 5 year deal. So that's something else you could do. And I expect that all the teams, and including the Jets, who now have a very big data analytics department, and again, this is not really data analytics. This is very, very simplified. The Jets are going to have all sorts of calculations and, intense things that they're going to put together with their analytics crew. But you could do it however you want, and then a lot of teams are going to have different ways to do it, different weights and measures, and how they project the team out several years into the future. So there's that, but this is just one look at a weighted draft board. So let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you're new for this kind of content, which is, I think, unusual in the Jet content creation world. We would love to have you subscribe. That's free. Or feel free to join and support. $2 a month gets you extra extras. That's the join button, the inner circle. Click the join button. $2 a month gets you tons of extra stuff. All right. With that being said, I will see you